broadcasting at the point. So I took up a trade because I have an electronic background on working on cameras. And I'd stay there late at night working on cameras, repairing them. And going up next to my office was the old staircase for the hotel. It went up to our general office and then went up to another floor. And I would hear footsteps going up the stairs at night. And I would think, oh, wow, I double locked the doors so the owners couldn't get in there. I'd go in there and turn all the lights on and look, and there's nobody there. And then it would progress out a week or two later. Instead of hearing like one person going up the stairs, then I'd hear like 2 or 3 people walking up the stairs. And then it got even so bad towards last, I heard muffled talking. And that's when I told the owner, I said, you know what? I'm not working here anymore. I can't deal with this. And it was scary.
I feel kind of bad for those guys you fired.
I did. Because I probably fired in a 10-year period, probably a dozen people because I got tired of hearing about ghosts.
Right, yeah.
But then I did some research after I quit. I found out it was a brothel at one point in the 1890s to, 1900.
Oh, you're kidding.
Then I found out that one of the prostitutes was actually murdered, cut up in pieces, and was found in a trunk in the room upstairs back at that time frame. And then there was a couple shootings in the bar where people got killed, because it was down in Tacoma, the ships would come in, and, it was kind of crazy time back in those time frames. And I tell you, it opened my eyes up that, there is things out there that do go bump in the night. And which before that, I didn't believe in ghosts.
Yeah.
If anybody told me there was ghosts, I thought they were crazy. Now I know there's something.
No, let me tell you. And that question that you originally asked me about, because, stuff starts coming back, memories about scary stuff. I remember one time I was doing an investigation, and it was again, hours into it, and it's like, okay, you go over there and I'll go over here, and let's let it quiet down. And it was one of those, the house was empty. In other words, nobody was living there. It was empty. So it was really quiet. And there was one of those, and I remember I was it was one of those older houses where, where everything is kind of narrower. And I was upstairs, and it was 2 bedrooms upstairs. And I remember I was off a hallway, and I was just sitting down on the floor, and I distinctly heard not only somebody coming up the stairs, but somebody barefoot coming up the stairs.
Oh.
Okay. And I don't know if it's because it wasn't one of, like you said, like a hotel staircase. This was an older house with those narrower staircases, basically just went upstairs.
Yeah. Did you get any creaking sounds?
I think that's why I heard it.
Did any creaking when they were going up the stairs?
Yeah, you could hear it really well.
Oh, wow.
Let me tell you, I knew first of all, nobody would have come up there without, raising, saying, hey, I'm going, In other words, we were trying to do EVPs. We were just trying to capture stuff. We had a couple of cameras running here and there, and you don't want to contaminate it. It was quiet, and we were hoping, okay, let's see if something comes up. And sometimes it's true. You don't realize what you captured till afterwards. So it was really quiet. It was on purpose. And I knew there was nobody that was barefoot. Nobody was going to be strolling from the team barefoot coming up the stairs. And I distinctly heard, I remember I had, I couldn't see the staircase. That was the thing. The way I positioned myself, I was trying to keep an eye. There was 2 bedrooms that came off like a hallway once you reach the top of the stairs. And I had placed myself almost, for lack of a better word, with my back. I couldn't see the stairs at all. I was trying to keep an eye on both bedrooms. And I remember hearing it, and I was like, what's really funny is I heard it coming louder, like when somebody's ascending the stairs. And if anybody's ever ascended, there's a distinct difference when somebody's wearing shoes to a barefoot tread. And that's what I heard coming up the stairs. It was a barefoot tread. And then I was like, okay, at some point, you're going to have to turn around. And it's almost like, let me tell you, talk about a frightening moment is where, okay, this is it. You got to put your big girl pants on. And I remember I just turned around. It was kind of dark, and we had ambient light. And there was nothing there. It was just almost like when it got to it just dissipated, stopped. There was nothing there. I was very wigged out. I was really wigged out, and it was like, how much am I feeling right now is actually something supernatural versus paranormal? I mean, I had the goosebumps, everything. The hair on the back of my neck was standing up. And then later on that night, I remember I said, okay, I decided to stay up there. And again, I wasn't running. I was running just a small digital recorder. And all of a sudden, one of the bedrooms that I was concentrating on, the only thing they had, it was kind of empty, and they had the bed irons and stuff like that for the bed. They had it propped up against one of the walls of the room, and there was a corner that was really dark. And all of a sudden, I smelled, like when it's about to rain, that you get like that smell of ionization.
Yeah, the ozone, yes.
Yeah. All of a sudden, I'm like, smelling this, and I'm like, and first of all, I could tell it wasn't rain, and I knew, because that's one of the things you do when you go to do investigations. You check the weather reports just so that you're prepared for inclement weather, not only during the investigation, but getting to and from the investigation. So I knew there was no rain forecast. I could look out the window. There was no rain, and all of a sudden I'm smelling ionization, and then I'm looking in the corner because I'm by the door of the bedroom, and I'm looking again. I'm sitting down in the floor because there's no chairs, and I'm looking towards the corner that's across from me, which is like the darkest point of the room in the shadows, and something comes out of there. And when I say something, it started out small, and then it kind of enlarged a little bit, almost to like human shape, size. It didn't step out of the shadow totally the size of a person. It just grew a little bit. And it's really weird because in the shadow, and this is kind of hard to explain, you could see, when somebody, their neck shifts and they become aware of you.
Oh, yeah.
Like all of a sudden, I see in the shadow where the face or the thing of whatever was there, like looks around at me and becomes aware of me and goes into the closet. And it was like, let me tell you, I didn't move, not because I was trying to stay still. It was like, even though you're there for that whole purpose, it was, and as soon as it went to the closet, that smell, everything was, and this happened very quickly. It's not like it was a drawn out process. But yeah, that's one of the times that one place I had a couple of, moments there where it was like, oh, okay, tomorrow I'm going to have a recovery day because it was a rough day. It was a rough day. It was a good, interesting day, but you need a down day after having an investigation like that, I guess is what I'm saying.
Now, have you investigated any of the old homes? Back in the 1800s, all the way up to probably around the early 1900s, a lot of times when people passed on, they would put the body in the coffin naturally in the parlor, and the people would have, come over and, have like a little picnic and celebrate that person's life. And I think by doing that, I think sometimes the people don't go on, to the light. They're still maybe trapped at that house. Have you run across anything like that?
Well, this is the thing, and you're absolutely right. Because, a lot of people nowadays, especially if the house has a little bit of history, they'll say, oh, because so-and-so died. And I was like, once upon a time, it was really common. People would have their babies at home and die at home. It wasn't like, how can I say, it wasn't macabre. It wasn't sinister. It was like, especially if the person had an illness, people would pass away in the house. And I know what you're saying. Occasionally I've had that, especially if the person had lived there for like a really long time. Before people wouldn't be so transient and people would like live 20, 30, 40 years in the same house. Or
second generation.
Yeah. It's like people wouldn't move away. They would stay there, or somebody would stay there. I've had a couple of instances. I've had other instances though, and I don't know if it's because Miami's a little bit newer. When I say newer, I would say Miami's been really established a little bit over 100 years, really, really, truly. And I found this in other parts of the United States where when towns were growing up and inevitably, they would start building stuff. And in this case, for example, Henry Flagler was putting out the railroad, and they were trying to get the people from north to winter down here, and he was bringing the railroad. They would bring in people to work on these projects. And what would happen is people would come in from different parts of the country basically to build whatever it was that was being built. Now, what would happen is, in some cases, the cemetery would be far away from where this was being built at. And a lot of these transient people, they didn't have a place to bury them. So they would make what I call like a unofficial graveyard, because, either the people didn't have family or nobody would claim them. The company who they were working for were like, okay, so what do we do to these people? Even back then, it would cost not a lot, but, you had to pay for something. And so they would basically make unofficial graveyards. Like, yeah, we're going to, go ahead and bury them there because there's no family. Nobody's claiming them. So, and I've run across some places where they've discovered later on. And of course, if they would put a marker, usually it was a wooden cross, which would, that disappears real quick with the weather. And everybody forgets that once upon a time that there was people buried there. And even then, they wouldn't even put them in a casket. They would just put them in those, what they call those winding sheets. And, people would die, have accidents on these jobs. A lot of the things that people would do back then when they were building railroads or whatever the case might be, or buildings, kind of was very dangerous work. And that I have run across. Everybody worries about cemeteries. There's a lot of places that are cemeteries and people just don't know that they are.
Oh, yeah. Especially older houses, it was quite common, to, if they had any acreage at all, they would plant I hate to say the word plant, but the deceased on the property, maybe next to that old maple or oak tree, and they'd be buried there. Then years and years go by, and then, people, come and go on the house. And next thing you know, somebody's out there doing, gardening, and all of a sudden starts finding bones. And strange things start happening before that. I was talking to a detective I had on my show here a couple months ago, a retired state police, detective. He was also a homicide detective, and he's now into ghost hunting, and he went to one house one time. They were having a lot of poltergeists, a lot of weird things going on. And it turned out they lived behind a cemetery. That wasn't the issue. They brought some ground detecting radar on the property, started checking out the person's backyard, and found out there was like 6 or 7 bodies, buried all the way up to almost to their entrance to their back door of their house.
Yeah. Yes. That's, let me tell you that. And every once in a while, I don't know if you've seen the news, every once in a while, they'll be digging for some project, and then they discovered a cemetery, an official cemetery that's almost like the Poltergeist movie where they said, they moved the headstones, but they didn't move the body. Where they'll say, oh, we're moving all these, all the coffins or whatever, the burials to another cemetery. But let's face it, a lot of these developers, they're thinking, man, it's going to cost a lot of money, or they'll take some, and then after a while, it'll be like, it's going to cost too much money. Forget it. Nobody knows. Don't worry about it. And then, fast forward a few years, 50, 60 years, depends. People start digging, like you said, for some reason, and they come across coffins and bones, and it turns out that, that they didn't move everybody. Or, and you're like what you said, people would have those family graveyards. The thing is, here in South Florida, especially deep South Florida, we have what they call the limestone, where to dig a hole here. As a matter of fact, there's a cemetery out here that closed down in 1955. And I remember that to dig a hole there, they had to pick it. This was before the use of heavy machinery. This was around 1919. And until they found this one guy who was really good with dynamite, and it would take him 6 hours, what they would normally take 2 days to basically dig the hole, because over here it's like solid limestone, in order to dig, sufficiently down to bury the person. So yeah, that happens quite a lot as far as and even now, I believe if I'm correct, it's not against the law. If you want to dig a hole for your loved one and bury them in your property, I believe.